Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session on the Black experience in Kansas City, in Greater Kansas City. I'm Diane Cleaver, President and CEO of the Urban Neighborhood Initiative, and we're very happy, along with the Chamber, to co-sponsor today's important discussion. You know, we are at a pivotal point, what I hope is a pivotal moment in time. Though there have been other moments that seemed pivotal and we didn't quite manage to make that pivot. The widespread passion and anger that we've seen now following the killings of George Floyd, layered on other recent killings of African Americans by police, has brought us to this moment in Kansas City and across the nation. The critical question is, will these events lead to the beginning of a real understanding that to be born African American in the United States is to be born into a very different set of life experiences from those of whites? These experiences are impacted both by inherent individual bias and particularly by the racism that has become systemic, that has somehow kind of gotten baked into systems. Today's session is an important opportunity to listen and to understand, which is the first step to meaningful action. And that is what the Chamber has pledged to take, and what the Urban Neighborhood Initiative has been working toward since our inception. The discussion may make us uncomfortable at times, but it's vital. Thank you for being here and for your willingness to listen. Our panel will be taking questions from the audience in the last part of today's conversations. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Bridgette Williams. Bridgette is Executive Director of the Heavy Construction Association and a member of the Kansas City Chamber Board of Directors and Executive Committee. Bridgette.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you to the hundreds of you who have joined us for this critical discussion. Today's session and the rest of the series we've planned is about moving from marches to action. In other words, it's okay. The marches and the actions are what brought us to this point. Well, we now need to transition that into action. Listening and more importantly, understanding are essential as we determine which path we need to take. Today, we want to hear the unfiltered experiences of our panelists so that we can determine our next steps as a chamber with real factual and data-driven information. The issue of systemic racism is not going to go away. We no longer can bury our heads in the sand. It's time for a change to make life better for African Americans in this community and in this country. And it's going to take all of us to make it better for African Americans in the greater Kansas City area and in the nation. We have 5 panelists with us today who bring a variety of experiences to this conversation. And so let me introduce them now. We have with us Diane Charity. She is an organizer and activist with the Kansas City Eviction Project. Simone Curls is Executive Director of the Prospect Business Association. Chris Goode is the owner and founder of Ruby Jean's Juicery and a member of the Kansas City, Missouri Board of Parks and Recreation. Justice Horn is president of the UMKC Student Government Association. And we have Commissioner Harold Johnson, Jr. He's a member of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas, and pastor of Faith Deliverance Family Worship Center. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for agreeing to be with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we want to get right
Thank
into
you.
it and start with, just some real questions. We all know that it was the actions by the police that culminated this issue into the demonstrations and the marches. But the systemic issue of racism is not just an issue that lays with the police department solely. We need public policy, we need police reform, and Black people need access to jobs. And so with that in mind, I would like to hear from each of you, and we're gonna limit this to 10 minutes per answer. But Simone, why don't we start with you to tell us about an experience that personally impacted you as a student or employee, and what you did to combat that.
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for me being on the panel. I truly am grateful for that. So when I actually am thinking about that, a couple of things come to mind, but I'll focus on one. I was actually living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time, believe it or not. And I worked for an organization, and they had an alternative sentencing program. And unbeknownst to me, through that program, they had started taking in participants who were actually KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Out of all the staff that worked there, and it was, quite a few of us, I happened to be the only minority Black. And all of the Klan got assigned to my caseload. And so I went to the CEO and president and said, hey, I don't know how this really is supposed to work. They're the Klan and I'm Black, and there's really no kind of unity there. Maybe, something happened. And he said, no, I know. And pretty much you can deal with them or kind of leave. And my husband and I had just had my oldest daughter. I had a new baby. And so I was stuck working with the Klan. So that was an experience I will never forget. And through that, it was a couple things that I learned. I'm Klan. Experience I will never forget. I'm strong, I'm resilient. Just switched a little bit to try to figure out what was this rift. Some people through the time being in this program, because they're alternative to going to jail. And so it was really eye-opening as to the stereotypes that they believe. One is that Black people actually have tails. They were expecting like a dog tail or a monkey's tail, and they were asking me, could they see? Two, that I actually was educated and that I actually had a job working with white people. And the third was you're articulate. You can actually talk. I don't know what that actually meant. Nobody could actually kind of to me. But overall, my physical presence and my being was a novelty to them. They had really never come in contact with, and when they did, it wasn't to have a dialogue. And so that was probably the most challenging experience that I had.
Okay. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh my gosh, you don't sound Black. What do Black people actually sound like? Where you sound like the environment that you live in. And so, that's always been very interesting to me. Commissioner Johnson, what has been an experience that has stuck with you?
Well, before I get into that, I just want to dovetail off of the statement that you just made in terms of being accused of sounding white or talking white. I think that's one of the challenges that we as people of color face all the time, and that we have to learn two different languages so that we can blend in when we are with the people that are Caucasian or otherwise, and then so we can blend in with our families and people of color. And I'm really held in tension right through there, because I don't see that development in other races per se as much as I see it within our own culture. I will say that as I was trying to matriculate through the banking system, I wanted to get into our management trainee program, and sent information over, did follow up, heard absolutely nothing about my ability to get into it. And they made it clear that they really looked at persons that were coming directly out of college. By that time, I had at least 4 or 5 years of banking experience, and wanted to just get into the management training program so that I could further my career. It wasn't until I was asked to be on Corporate Diversity Council that I came in contact with some of the senior management. And through my dialogue with them, and I suppose just by them being impressed by the way that I did worked with the committee, they said, and within a month, I was interviewing, and then lo and behold, I'm in the management trainee program. So again, I'm not going to necessarily attribute that to race, but I do think that it has something to do with it. I realized at that time in my closing that I had to have a master's degree, where a lot of my peers had a bachelor's degree. I figured out a way to level the playing field. And so that's been my experience in the past.
Justice?
Yeah, so just to clarify for the panel and the attendees, so I was the former UMKC student body president. I just got done doing that this May, but just wanted to make that very clear so I'm not taking away from the former president. So when I look back on kind of my childhood, there are a lot of things that I faced that, and I know a lot of us have, that were either blatant racism, and that's like calling someone the N-word, or microaggressions. I think today we see a lot of microaggressions, not only in the workplace, but in education, in housing, and even just conversation with our neighbors. It's comments like, oh, and I do not stand by any of these comments, but these are examples. When people look at me, they're like, oh, you must play football, or oh, you talk really proper, where'd you get your education, or you sound white, or and this is nothing against the attendees, but they say, oh, you're pretty for a Black woman, stuff like that. That is very inappropriate and wrong. So I know we deal with a lot of microaggressions, and this is stuff I still deal with today. So I know you asked what's kind of the latest incident. It's stuff like that. Or when I'm out jogging across Kansas City, people will make it their action to cross the other side of the street and walk that way because they get intimidated, or they see me getting on the elevator and they rush to shut the door. It's just stuff like that, where it's basically being targeted out for being a Black man.
Diane, Charity?
Thank you, Bridget. I can relate to each story that each person has told so far. I think we've all experienced those things, but it brought to mind something that happened when I joined the Army Reserves. I was a military police officer, and I was with a lot of other police officers. And they did me a favor. This was in the 70s. They did me a favor by sharing with me that there's an NNAN law in North Kansas City. And if you can, I'm gonna put it nicely, no Negroes after night, okay? So they said, Diane, you haven't lost anything up there. Don't go up there, leave that alone. And to this day, I don't go up there. If I can help it at all, there's nothing up there I've lost or inclined to be with up there. So, but that's just one. Plus, you know, my mother had us marching in 1964 downtown for public housing or public accommodations, even in the department stores and things like that. It's just a whole life of that. Microaggressions, major aggressions, those kinds of things that really have me the activist that I am for equality or equity.
So Diane, you transitioned perfectly into the next question. And so, you know, we as parents of Black children have all had the talk with our children about how they should respond when they're pulled over by the police. It is a different, it's a different feeling. It's a different type of fear. It's an unexplainable type of fear when you see those lights flashing behind you, because you just don't know what type of person is going to come up to your window. So Diane, why don't you just start and tell us about the conversation you had with your children when they became driving age, of how to handle themselves when they're stopped by the police.
And I did have those conversations. I do have a son that I had that conversation with early on. Don't move fast. Don't reach for your wallet. Do not go into the glove compartment to get anything out. Now, with my daughter, who is older, I didn't quite have such a serious talk because I just kind of assumed she'd be all right. But my daughter, when she moved to Texas, was accused of what they call assault with a deadly weapon, because she bumped the back of a cab. She spent 5 years on probation. She calls it 5 years a slave. That she actually, and all she really did was she cussed the police officer out. I told her don't do that. But she did that, and for that they gave her, she faced 100 years in prison had she not pleaded guilty to this assault that did not take place. She's been in jail in Oklahoma for 2 weeks. Took one of her shoes off because she was driving along in a sports car. And they pulled her over and accused her of some fraud or something that she did not do. And it took me $5,000 just to get her out so that she could defend herself. It's crazy. Both my children, I'm scared to death every time they walk out the door.
So Commissioner Johnson.
I will say that if I just first of all think about my own upbringing, my parents told me, and I was told to keep it real on this podcast. So when I was coming up, it was said, son, if you're pulled over by the police, don't act a fool. Keep your mouth shut, answer the questions, and don't give them any problem, because
Commissioner, you're cutting out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to intellectualize that as I talk to my children, and I tell them to be aware of their surroundings. This is always key. Be as cooperative as you can. Don't be confrontive, no matter what you feel is right or wrong. Just don't be confrontive. Remember and write down names and numbers so that if any point you feel uncomfortable, that you can come to me and we can report that to the police department. And so those things have been what has kept me. Now, growing up as a young man, I was in my 20s, I decided to buy a candy apple red Pontiac GT 5-speed. And it was pretty sweet. Needless to say, those are one of the vehicles, any car that's cherry apple red, candy apple red, and that has the name GT behind it, it's just basically a bullseye. And I found while traveling the streets of Kansas City, Missouri, from Kansas, that I was pulled over twice in one day. And it wasn't long after that I traded that vehicle in because I couldn't afford to have my license taken with that car. So
yes,
there's been experiences that I've had to deal with in my life.
Chris, why don't you tell us about some of your experiences and what the conversation you intend to have with your son when he's of age?
I can echo that same experience from driving while Black. So I worked in the insurance world, adjusting claims across the country for about 5 years. And about midway, I had a vehicle at home, and I was like, "It's no point. I might as well sell this and just drive the company vehicle." So I got comfortable just driving around and, my insurance van, no matter when I was home, where we went, I'm in my insurance van. But when I got out of that role, I had been saving my money, and I said, you know what? I've sacrificed. I want to get something I want. And so I got this beautiful Tahoe. It was like my first brand new car, and it was with my own money. And it was something that I wanted. I didn't need it, but I really wanted it. And I souped it up. I put black rims on it, black tint, debadged it. So everything about it was black. Oh my God. When I tell you I got pulled over, unbelievable. I mean, multiple times in the same week, multiple times in the same day. And it was always, we couldn't see this, or, some really, really bad excuse. And the same as you, I got rid of that car. And as I think about that and experiencing that, and being who I am and really being active in the community, and I think about the kids that are getting pulled over and they may not know how to handle themselves, it saddens me. It's a shame that being Black is like this fearful thing, and having the type of car that looks a certain way is a fearful thing. And when I think about my son and him coming up through that system and that reality, first and foremost, I just tell him who he is. I make sure that he knows who he is, how capable he is, how loved he is, what his value is on this planet, and what he's able to do. But then I will warn him. I will make him know that you are feared. You are feared, and there's power in that, but you have to understand what that power is. And there's a time and a place that you'll execute on that power. But the time when the police are pulling you over is certainly not the time.
Yeah, I have a 19-year-old son, and what we're trying to convey to the listening audience is that there is a true fear when our kids are out driving alone, particularly at night, and specifically boys. It doesn't matter that that he graduated from St. Thomas Aquinas. It doesn't matter what position his mother holds. It doesn't matter what university he's in. When they're pulled over, they see a Black boy with twist in his hair, who is big, and there is just a different dynamic that occurs. And so the conversation we had with our kids is hands on the steering wheel where they can see them. You talk very politely, like you were raised to respect your elders, and you don't get in a confrontation with them. You let us handle that. And so, it's a shame that you have to have those types of conversations, but I am telling you, at 19, I am just as afraid of him being out alone or with his friends as a group today as I was when he first started driving. And that's not to say there aren't some good police officers out there. So, but there is a real difference in how we as parents of Black children have to prepare our kids as they go out into the real world. And so with that question, Diane, have you had any positive encounters with police?
I have. I'm trying to think of one, so they don't come fresh to my mind very often. But there was one that did take place just a couple of weeks ago. I was with one of the staff of UNI, as a matter of fact, and we got pulled over. She was driving, and the officers that stopped me came and looked into her license were expired on her car. And he looked into her side, which was the driver's side, and he said, "Are you okay?" And of course, yeah, okay. I had to hide some things that were in the car, and he let us go. And it scared me, but she apologized. She said, "Diane, I'm sorry, because I know if we had changed seats, we would have been under the jail. You would have been under the jail," but they let the white lady go. And I'm just glad I was riding with her and not driving her.
So, Simone, how about you and your kids? Have you had any positive experiences?
Driving. You know, I will say relocating back to Kansas City and working with the Prospect Business Association as executive director, we partner with the police, East Patrol Station. And so that has given me the opportunity to actually try to get to know individuals and to be able to ask those hard questions and to say, what are you thinking about? You know, how does this work? How does, you know, are you thinking, are you not? Like, what are your thoughts? And trying to get an understanding and being able to have that one-on-one dialogue, because I am concerned. And I know we're talking about the positive, but I would just like to throw in there, if I can, I have girls. And so I'm definitely afraid as well. You know, Sandra Bland is an example. And I have very strong, intelligent, articulate daughters. And I also tell them, you know, watch your body language, watch your tone, allow them to feel like they're in control, allow them to maintain their power status, answer questions when asked, make no sudden moves. Because that's very important, because at the end of the day, I want our Black male and female children to come home and to stay alive. And so I think that that is just imperative. That is just two sets of standards. And I'm gonna say this last thing. I was living in Los Angeles, and my daughter has a friend, and they are white, and the police did stop us. And the lady began to go bananas on the police, and she's cursing, and I'm just floored and horrified. And the police officer, he was very calm, ma'am. He didn't say anything. At the end of the day, he let us go. And I turned around, looked at my children, and I said, don't you ever think that you could try that, because that won't work. That will not work with us. We are Black. That doesn't work. Do not, you know, that is just not an example of how you handle, because we as Black people are treated completely different and separate. Because my belief is my children would have been thrown under the jail if they would have spoken to that police officer in that manner. The lady who was driving, my friend, and she just couldn't understand where I was coming from, because it's just a different perspective of two different lives here in these United States.
So I want to make the point that, you know, these sessions are the foundation of what we're going to take from these sessions, actions to put in place to move forward to make life better for African Americans, particularly in the greater Kansas City area. We also want the audience to feel free to start presenting your questions. On the topic that we're speaking about right now, the NAACP does have a book out that talks about how a Black man or a Black person should respond when they're pulled over by the police. And so any parent that doesn't know how to have that conversation with their children needs to have that conversation with their children. Now, I will say from my experience, I have had some positive encounters with police. I know one time I was making a left turn. I had my blinker on. He said I had my blinker on, but he said I turned into the wrong lane. I turned too soon in the other lane, whatever that means. I was furious. And I just, you know, I was young and dumb, and I just like went off. I didn't cuss him out, but I did go off. And he so patiently said to me, well, ma'am, I'm new, and this is my first day on the force, and so I'm going to let you go with a warning. And so, that was probably 20 years ago, because I don't speed anymore and I don't make any mistakes when I drive. So there's no reason for them to pull me over. But so there are some good police out there, and we don't want to lose that point. But to that point, we do believe there needs to be more minority, both men and women, in the police department. And that is not just the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, because our children cross state lines. So what do you think we need to do to assist in the hiring of more Black and brown people in the police departments? Chris?
I think that, in my opinion, you have to get to kids early. I think there's a natural reluctance for Black people to be police officers. It's certainly understandable. But I think that the only way we shift and balance out the power is we get more Black police officers that can speak to the perspective of Black people. Because if you have a white guy that grew up in the country, has a very singular focal point on how he sees Black people, and then he runs into me, and I'm 230, I got tattoos down to my hands, I'm 6'2", he's going to be afraid. But if then you have more Black people that don't have that same fear, that can even shed light onto their counterparts in the academy, I think it'll help things. And the only way to do that is to get to kids earlier, educate them about the profession, about the importance of the balance of the profession, and help them matriculate into that system. But not, at this point, at my age, if I didn't have an interest in being a police officer by now, it's too late. So I think, attaching to the high schools in some way and showing that this is a profession that we need more Black people into, for the safety of Black people, for the longevity of Black people, for the balance of power, then it may be more effective.
I agree. Justice?
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think we need to make it more of an effort to first build relations with the African American community and the police department. I think even myself, when I was growing up, I did want to be a police officer. And then growing up and seeing that, hey, they're not exactly the nicest or the most welcoming, or there's not a lot of representation in the police force, I know that kind of pushed me away from being a police officer, because I saw that how they would treat the African American community. So that was while I was growing up. I think we need to continue to build relations with the African American community and the police department, and then not only that, make it an equitable and fair job. I think when we're looking at industries to go into, if they're not well represented, we're not going to enter them. I mean, we could say this with being Black in healthcare, being Black in the business world, being Black in politics. I mean, there's not a lot of representation there. So it's not going to look attractive to our youth. They're going to go into the industries where they see a lot of representation. And I'm not trying to at all dog anyone for this, but that's why we see a lot of our African American community continuing to go in the same job industries, because we need to continue to pursue industries that have never seen anyone like us. We need to penetrate industries that have never seen anything like us, so that we can get in there and change the nature of things. I think we need to continue to pursue that, because in the same breath, I think representation matters. And if you want to change an institution, you have to be in an institution first.
That's absolutely true. So before we transition, there's one question here. How young is too young to have the conversation about how to act when confronted by the police? So what do you guys think about that? Justice, how young is too young? I mean, how young is old enough to have the conversation?
I think I think everyone should be having conversations of race in America and just race in society early on. I would say well before, I would say even 10 years old, but we need to make it absolutely relevant to not only our Black youth that yes, we have these values, this is how we treat everyone, but the world's not going to treat you the same. I think that's a hard and tough conversation we need to let our youth know, is that yes, we would like it to be an even playing field, but you as a Black child, you're gonna have to face other things that maybe a white child may not do. And that's a good example is something I know, and being in meetings and stuff, you have to be well aware of your surroundings. So I try not to present myself as too dominant, and or I will never raise my voice in a meeting, not to play into that stereotype of a loud, angry Black man. So there's a lot of stuff that I think us as Black individuals, we have to learn. And even, I know everyone here knows what code switching is. I know that we don't have to have that conversation with our white allies or our white youth. So there's a lot of things, I think it's earlier the better, that they understand what's going on in the world they have to face. And that honestly, the standard is set higher. I'm not going to get political here, but we see our current president and then our last president, Obama, if he would have stepped out of line with anything that our current president did, he would have been ousted. So I think that standards are set different and higher for people of color, because it takes one incident for us and then we're out. But there's not that same standard set for our white counterparts.
So that's absolutely true. And Commissioner Johnson, I want to ask you, you know, I remember as a child, you know, being taught about stranger danger and you know, you run to the closest police officer and get help. And here we're having a conversation about not trusting and what you should do when you encounter the police when you get older. How do you balance that?
You know, for me, honestly, I have always told my children, before you call anybody, you call me. And I think that is what is very important and perhaps missing in this whole dialogue so far, and I think we'll probably get into it, is the role that the support system plays for our young children as they're growing up and matriculating. And I recognize as I've gotten older, I was blessed to be able to have a mother and father in the home where I could call them as well. But my first inclination was never to call the police, it was to call mom and dad. And so I have instilled that same thing, and I've assured my children, if you call me, it doesn't matter. Matter of fact, if they call me right now, I'm probably going to mute myself and see what's going on, because I made that promise to them as children. And I feel it is essential to continue on with that, even though one is 24 years old, almost 24 years old, the other one's 17 years old. I think it's very important for us to be able to create that sense of security for our children. Yes, I think secondarily, they do need to be able to tell police, to tell persons in authority wherever they are, if they're in trouble, if they're in danger. But we have to recognize that people see life through different sets of lenses. And so what we perceive might be a crisis, because we are in a world by different standards, as justice is already put up before us, then we have to be mindful that other people may not understand the perspectives that we bring. So my thing has always been, call me, you know, and I'm gonna come running, and then I'll call the police on my way, and we'll meet you wherever it is.
And that is truly, that is the mentality of the Black parents, is that we engage in every step of our children's life. And yes. So I want to ask you, Simone,
hey, Bridgette, I have a question. Are we at all going to have any Q&A sessions? Because
yeah, I'm reading questions off of them.
Yes. I did want to answer Macy's question. I didn't.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
All right, thank you.
Once they text them to me, they're not texting yet. So I want to ask Simone, how has being Black affected how you raised your children and affected how you behave in your personal and professional life? Simone? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So with regards to my children, I, like the commissioner, have said, hey, if anything happens, call mommy, I'm on my way. So there's no doubt, you know, that you are protected and you are supported. You're the child, let me argue and fight for you, because that's my role. Secondly, my daughter in the first grade was called the N-word. And so she didn't know what that meant. She knew it wasn't a good word. And so we had to have the conversation in the first grade. And so the reality is I told her, I said, hey, this is going to happen. This is America. And so to start prepping her in the first grade for people's, I like the way it was presented from various lenses and how people feel and their perspective. The other thing is that never compromise who you are. Never compromise and feel like you have to kowtow to someone because you are Black. Don't ever go against your beliefs. Let's stand tall and let's use our words. And lastly, unfortunately, in trying to balance the scales for them, is, you know, everybody isn't your friend, but there are good people on both sides. Because I don't want my children to walk around thinking that when they see someone that they're all bad, because all people are not all bad. And so we try to take people, even though their head is on a swivel, and there are those things that that are of the United States, but for them to also try their best to see the goodness in people, as we hope that people see the goodness in us.
So we have a question about the disparity in murders of transgender Black women. And so how do you all see, to me, when I walk in a room, before anybody knows anything about me, they see I'm Black. Before they really know I'm a woman, executive director, got brown eyes, they see I'm Black. So whether you're transgender or female or male, at the end of the day, you're still Black. And I just think it may change in the event of the outcome, but when they when they pull you over, what they see is a Black person. So Justice, you wanted to answer the question. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'm happy that it's being brought up and that we're having this discussion. I mean, not only am I a person of color, I'm also in the LGBTQ community. So I think it's absolutely important that we have this conversation. I think absolutely we need to say not only Black Lives Matter, but Black trans lives matter. I know that this conversation has happened for a long time with the Black Lives Matter movement, but then at the same time, in the shadows of our cities and the shadows of the criminal justice system, trans women have been murdered at a higher rate, and it never makes national news. There's never any attention to it, because not only are they a double minority, but not only are they Black, they're women, and they're transgender. I mean, and they usually don't have a good support system and or people to lean on. We have to make it very clear that although it is June month, Pride month, the LGBTQ movement started when a transgender woman threw a brick in the Stonewall movement that galvanized a whole movement. But then at the same time in 2020, they're still getting murdered at the highest rate of anyone in our community. It shows that we still have work to do, and this is an important time to have the conversation of intersectionality, because even what I faced personally these past 2 or 3 weeks, it has to be stated that there still is a lot of homophobia and transphobia in the African-American community. But then in the same breath, there's a lot of racism in the white community. I mean, there's a lot of racism in the LGBTQ community. So I think when you see both of those problems and they intersect, if you're Black and a trans woman, there's a problem. And that's why you have so many disparities against transgender women. And that's why we see so many anti-transgender bills in the state legislature and even disparities in healthcare. I mean, we can't continue to say we're going to protect them when our policies and our institutions don't do that.
So let's transition to corporate America. What role do you all feel that corporate America, what responsibility do you feel that corporate America shares in making life better for African Americans? Chris? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I did. You muted me. I think it's at some point, you know, there has to be more than just talk, more than just words. There are, I mean, unbelievable amounts of very qualified Black people that are far overlooked, and it's too often. So I think that in Kansas City, every single organization, whether it be nonprofit, for-profit, city organization, there has to be a true audit. What over the last 5 years, 10 years, who Black has been hired, at what rates have they been hired, what positions have they held, what are their salaries in comparison to the counterparts? Simple as that. And if that audit comes back and it's this big gap, then there's work to do. And I don't have to see the answer to the audit. I already know there aren't Black people getting hired in the positions of power. And thus, if there are no decision makers that look like me making the decisions, there's no one that can speak for me that's actually sitting at the table, that writes the checks, that makes the true decisions of the company. So you can go through all the sensitivity trainings you want, all the workshops, all the trust scenarios you want in the entire world. But until the money matches up with the words, then it won't matter. George Floyd was murdered, and the next day the stock market rose. The only thing that matters is green, when it really boils down to it about making change, and that's economics. And the Black buying power, it is unbelievably strong. And so as Black people, once we understand that is true, then we have to really harness that power. But then the counterparts that sit in the positions of power have to authentically recognize that, authentically, not to meet quotas or to save face or to look good, but to say, you know what, the only way our corporations can excel is by having an authentic presence of Black people in positions of power. And so until that happens, you know, we're just talking.
Diane?
I wanted to speak to that. Thank you, Chris, because that is so true. The color is not Black. The color is not white. The color is green. And who's ever got the money and think that they're in power because they have money, you know, it's absolutely sickening. People who, it's the people who have the power, not the money people. You know what I'm saying? And that really brings me to the point of organizations and nonprofit organizations that have become multi-billion-dollar industrial complexes. I call them poverty pimps. Not all of them, but a lot of them are pimping, you know, and they wouldn't be where they are or making the salaries they did if we were not poor. So here we are, those that don't make the $50,000 or the $75,000, whatever it is, here we are as those little ones, and we're the one, the little man, and we're the ones that not only the cops get on, that the corporations get on, that the people that are representing, I should say, gatekeeping, not widening the gate open, but keeping the gate closed. All skin folk ain't kin folk. You know, it's people that whole thing. I've got this passion. We've got to have an apology tour. And I know some folks that need to line up and get in line to say, I'm sorry to these youth. I'm sorry. I did you this way. I'm sorry. I'll talk about it later.
So, you know, you bring up a good point because African Americans are taxed at a disproportionate amount. You know, the urban core pays for incentives, it pays for development, it pays for all these things, yet there's not much benefit in return for that. So, you know, part of, if we're talking about a remedy, access to jobs is critical because it impacts your ability to get educated, it impacts your ability to take care of your kids, it impacts your ability to buy a home, it impacts all of that. So what do you think about, what do you feel is the remedy? Where do you feel we should start in terms of a remedy coming from, you know, the banks and corporate America and areas of that concern? Diane?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you asked that question. It really is exciting to me. I think about the American dream, quote unquote, and what that is. And so is that American dream, what does it mean to you or to me? To me, it means freedom. Freedom not to buy a house. I ain't mad at the people that want to buy a house. I don't want to own a home. So why should that be my dream? But I do want to live in a place that I'm able to afford. Now, my rent has gone up 27%, almost 30% in 5 years. They're trying to push me out of here, a gentrification. I know that. They set it up that way so that by the time they get through getting their tax credits for me living here, and by the way, it's not I don't pay a subsidy. I'm not on a subsidy. And then people say, well, just get on Section 8, just get on a subsidy. Why should I have to? Why am I not able to afford the rent? Now, when they talk about affordable housing, that's a code word to the developer to build some cheap stuff and then charge me out the yang for it. You know, yeah. Affordable housing is not for us. We want able to afford housing. But absolutely. You know, I'll go on. I'm sorry.
Simone, how do you respond to that?
I think one thing that we need, and through the Prospect Business Association we're looking at, is equitable financial resources for the East Side of Truce, because it's not. And so when you look at that, and so as we look at jobs, small businesses are important, our micro businesses are important. And so when people go for loans, when they go to get a loan, our rates on this side are higher. How we are looked at, how our financials are looked at is somewhat different. We want equitable financial resources similar to what is going on in downtown, the Crossroads. I don't know anybody on the East Side of Truce, and I'm gonna just call it like I see it, that can obtain $4 million annually from the city of Kansas City to operate their business. I would like the people on the East Side of Truce to have those same $4 million opportunities that people who are not on the East Side of Truce. I've never heard of that. So when we have a gap in finance, we have to go and figure it out. And the remedies that we have to do, we have to start looking at some non-conventional methods and building a capital stack. How much do we need to do? But someone else who is not on the East Side of Truce can come and say, I'm going to have an annual deficit of $4 million, and the city is going to support that and pay into that. We want the exact same thing on the East Side of Truce. And then, as everyone has talked about, asset building, we have to build asset. So when you have jobs, and we're looking at the disparities in healthcare, jobs help and the money help with regards to the healthcare of others, and building a family. We're looking at building a healthy community in totality. So all of those incentives that are created for the East Side need to actually be utilized for the East Side of Truce, and not taken away and siphoned off to do, something else.
So Justice, I know you have to run to get to City Hall. I do want to say one last thing on that.
I think it's absolutely clear, and even this conversation to defund the police or reallocate or whatever the wording may be, I think the only reason why we're having that conversation is because there's so many socioeconomic disparities in Kansas City, where I'm happy that it was stated, but then even going a step further, you have a different life expectancy based on which side of truce you live. That came out from our health department this year. And not only that, we need to be very clear. We need to be investing in the African-American community, because we still have problems, yes, in our over-policed communities, but in housing, education, economic mobility, transportation, food deserts, mental health resources, and we could go on and on about that. I think, and this is my personal belief, a lot of our city dollars and our business dollars should be going to those areas in our community to better our community. Because my dream is for example, the plaza should look like 18th and Vine, and vice versa. Every single street, every single business development, and especially even the Hispanic district, like the plaza, if we really put money and investment into those areas. Because once there are good business there, there are good workers there, then we have housing development, then we have better schools, then we have streetcar development, and then it all is hand in hand. If we want to see a better community, then we need to invest, and it's going to have to start with our businesses.
No, I agree. Chris, what do you feel is the bank's responsibility in terms of providing better access to loans, whether it's for mortgages or entrepreneurship or what have you? In a perfect world, what would that look like?
I don't know what that perfect world looks like. I just, I think about slavery, and I think about free labor, and then I think about my business and the tune of how many taxes I pay and my payroll every month. And then I think about the ability to create generational wealth for my kid and for his kids. And I think, man, this is not just 401 years. This is 401 pounds that we got to carry, and we got to start from behind the 8 ball, carrying this insurmountable weight with no real opportunity. If I come to you and I say, I want to start a juice bar in your building, and I have no experience, I have this great business plan, will you give me $1 million? The answer is no. The answer is no. Make no mistake about it. And the thing is, I knew that. So I didn't even try. I said, I got to do this myself, my way, on my terms. And that's what I did. But at some point, there has to be the ability to say, you know what? These Black businesses are just great businesses. They're great businesses. And we don't necessarily have the ability to measure them on their credit score, on their Dun & Bradstreet, because we know they came in the door fighting a battle that they could not in a million years fight themselves. So how do you create some kind of a bridge between all these funds that go in and all these non-for-profits that just do, I don't know what they do, and then create that bridge to a qualified Black business that they can then truly leverage and create something amazing that they can't do by themselves. So there has to be some type of a difference in how we're measured when our businesses are quality. I'm not saying just because you have a Black business, you should just, hey, here's $1 million. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you can identify 10 Black businesses that operate on the east side of Truce, on the west side of Truce, wherever they operate, if they are quality and they meet the standards of their counterparts, but just need that leverage, and they, so me personally, I sacrificed my personal credit in order to start my business. I didn't have any other way. There was no other way for me to do what I'm passionate about doing without sacrificing my almost perfect credit score down to nothing. And so there has to be some type of a real conversation where we're able to leverage and grow our businesses at the same rate as our counterparts, and we can't be measured the same because we didn't come into have a life insurance policy waiting on us, a trust fund, a paid off house, anything. And so at some point, and I get passionate about it because, it's just like, I don't like a lot of talk, and we have to talk in order to get somewhere. But at some point, what when can we say, okay, we know there's resources here, and it doesn't have to be my business. Let's go find a business and let's empower them for real. Let's put $1 million into them and see what they can do. Let's see what they can build on the east side. Let's let them pour into their community. But without that $1 million, we're just talking. We're just talking. It's just like this is good for, good for TV. Let's feel like we're doing something that, that feels good. It makes us feel good. But we're not actually doing anything until we put real dollars behind the words. And so we got to pump money into the community in the places it should be pumped into, and they're not hard to identify.
And that's a good point. And I also want to hear from Commissioner Johnson on this as well. But that is why this is so important, because it's about putting the marches and the talk into some action that directly benefits African Americans in the greater Kansas City area. And so that sounds like an action item that we can put on the list to really begin exploring how that occurs, and not 5-10 years from now. Commissioner? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you were having a good conversation too. I
was. You and Chris got me so worked up. I wanted to take my tie off and my jacket, but I thought it might be inappropriate at this point in time.
No, you gone. Get relaxed.
That's what we do. As preachers, when we get to preaching real good, we undo our tie. That means we're really preaching. Chris, you hit it on the head, man. And I remember my time in the banking asking that question. My experience was in Kansas City, Missouri. I lived in Kansas City, Kansas. I remember asking the question of the decision makers, why do we not have brick and mortar banks east of 47th Street in Kansas City? And the answer I got was, just like other industries, whether that be grocery stores or you just name the other industries, we follow new housing development or new markets. And they didn't feel like the urban core brought to them the kind of revenues that would justify them building a brick and mortar facility, and also the kinds of revenues that would allow them to be profitable. So from those conversations, I thought that, you know what, I need to be intentional. And just as a point of reference, I have personally boycotted everything on the outer rim of 435. If it's out, with the exception of Wyandotte County, I need the legends here. They help us tremendously. But everywhere else, if it's outside of 435, I won't spend my money there unless I absolutely have no other choice. And we have to be mindful as Black people, as people of color, that we do have power in our pockets and where we spend our money. Now, everybody says we deserve to have what everybody else has. I think that as I transition, majority businesses, you talk about banks or whatever, they really need to be intentional about how they engage not only smaller businesses, but also communities of color. We do have money. It's not to say we don't have money. We do have money. And so I think the banking industry, I think every other industry needs to be intentional about engaging those communities, letting them know that they are welcome, that they are wanted, and that their money is valuable, because they have devalued us as people as well as our money. But if we collectively were to move all of our collective money into certain areas, you will be able to tell the shift. And so that's one of the things that I've been mindful of as a commissioner as well, to build up the economic dignity of the urban core. And quite frankly, that is a much more difficult conversation. You're right, Chris. It's a whole lot of talking. You got to do a whole lot of talking to get developers to want to come to the urban core. And then, of course, you have the whole incentive discussion, it can be very frustrating because we don't see the same thing happening out in the suburbs. And so, it's something that you have to look at for the long haul. So I tell people, if we're going to turn around the urban core of Wyandotte County, we need to look out on the short side would be 10 years, and we need to be really looking at a 25-year plan that will turn this situation around. Point that I will make is look at the legends. The legends didn't come into being till about 23 years ago. And now the legends are one of the prominent shopping, no money, but I look at license plates. And I love seeing Missouri license plates and Johnson County license plates and Shawnee County license plates. And so we have to be intentional about those things. So anyway, I think that, again, we have to be encourage our businesses ways and reach back out into minority communities and help our small Black-owned businesses, particularly in times like this, in times where COVID-19 has hit the entire community. It's really hit small businesses as well, because a lot of them had no choice but to shut down. And so I think that the larger companies should be mentoring our small help those businesses along, particularly in times like we're dealing with right now. Because that community is the one that's being hit the hardest.
So every, thank you, Commissioner. You cut out that whole last part.
Great.
But every,
You hear that?
Can I chime in there, Bridgette, real quick?
yes.
Oh, so one point that, like, you know, when you consider coronavirus, and this is firsthand experience, and I have a successful business, right? And at the end of the day, I'm a tenant, okay? And if I don't own my dirt, then I don't have any control. We'll be in business 5 years next month, and we've opened, closed locations, and one of the most difficult portions of that entire process has been dealing with ownership on any range of issues. And so when we talk about building up the Black community, sure, we have great Black businesses, but we have to get to the point to where we own our buildings. If you took a survey and said there's 100 Black businesses and there's 100 white businesses, and you ask who owns their property, I mean, there might be, like, you know, Gates will raise their hand on the Black side, and not everybody, but a lot will be like, you know, us. And that's a problem, because we don't really have any control. I'm fighting with very, very wealthy people under circumstances I could have never imagined encountering, ever. And I know for a fact they got relief. So then if I'm in a position of ownership and we run into this economic downturn and there's relief to be had from the lender, who all we're doing is, because we didn't have enough the credit worthiness, all we're doing is paying the lender. We're just passing our money through somebody else. We're making enough revenue to own our property, but we don't have the credit worthiness because of all these other issues that we've effectively communicated. But until we're talking about actual ownership of dirt, we're not, again. Ruby Jeans is a great business. It's a good business. I think it's a good business. It could be great with some tweaks. But one of the things that could make us a great business is if we owned our property. And we owned our property and we could do things our way. So that's just one point I want to, as we talk about the mentorship from big business to small business, it's great to be mentored, but until you put me in a position to own my dirt, you're not really putting me in a real position. You're just patting me on the back and saying, hey, good job. Keep it up.
So along those lines.
Can I chime in for a second? I'm sorry, Bridgette.
Who is that? Simone?
This is Simone.
Okay, your video has disappeared. Yes, Please do.
And I just wanted to say, I agree with the commissioner and Chris. And one thing I want to talk about is banking is, yes, we do want the banks here and working with us, but we want to be more than just a depository. You know, so if you come in the community as a bank, don't just take our money and, you know, and not give loans. So it has to be more than just seeing Black people as a consumer. Now, if we talked about the green, so if you work and, you know, come, you know, here, work with us. Again, banking is great, but if you're not giving loans and you're just going to take the people's money just to hold it, then how does that help us build? How does that help us, you know, with all of the things we need to do? So that ownership, and one of the things that people are looking at as far as Black people is that we have to start looking and to build and to join together, because if we own it, you know, together we could do more. So I don't know, you know, where the policies are on that, but just coming over here and just looking at us as straight consumers is a problem.
Bridgette?
Yes.
Can I just jump in real quick, and I'm gonna step back out? This whole idea that the banks cannot make money is a hoax, because the check cashing places have figured out how to make money. The title loan places have figured out how to make money. The payday loan places have figured out how to make money. And the dollar stores have figured out how to make money. And all of those things are done in communities of color where there's supposedly poverty and that they can't make any money. Well, they're doing quite well. In fact, some of these companies are traded on the stock market. So again, the idea that we can't, that a majority business cannot be profitable is just not true. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the predators in our neighborhoods. I'm stepping out.
So the lines are blowing up on this financial discussion. And one question is, how can financial leaders in the community push for greater equality when Black-owned businesses face stricter regulation requirements? Commissioner?
Say that question
I'm
again.
sure. So when a Black-owned business faces stricter regulation requirements, basically is what we're saying. The loans that they get, generally, they're more high interest. There is not a real access to capital. What can the banks do how can the banks play a role in relaxing those requirements?
You know, this is going to transcend a lot of the discussions that we have on this conversation. There needs to be what I would call a remake, a remodeling of these institutions and these policies. And so as we talk about African communities, as we talk about Latino communities, et cetera, there is a way. And so to just get straight to the question, why don't these businesses sit down and talk to people, instead of us coming in there with our little hat in our hands? If you value us that much, Black lives do matter, Black money ought to matter too. Come to us and talk to us about what the requirements are, how you all go about making decisions, and how can we come to a point where we can agree on how we will move forward in terms of establishing a relationship that builds that relationship over a period of time. And so the numbers in terms of profitability, if for instance, your model says I got to have 30% profitability on an account, on a loan, or whatever it may be. Maybe you start out at 10% and escalate that up over a period of time. So we have to look at the regulations that we have and the policies that are within each particular organization or each particular company, and be willing to remake that model, because that model does not work for every kind of community. And so there are literally countries around the world in smaller communities where they've changed that model, where it has become more of a cooperative model, and the level of profitability is not measured the same as it would be in a majority population. So that's a place that I would start, you know, engage the community, look at your model, and think about ways to outside the box, such as they are right now, that you can be profitable. Maybe you're not making 30%, but maybe you're making 20 or 15%, and then that can grow as we begin to develop that relationship as a whole.
And so this is not only access to loans for businesses, this is also about access to loans for housing, you know, whatever, you know, automobiles, whatever the case may be. And our municipalities invest a lot of money in banking institutions. How do you feel about leveraging those municipalities, leveraging those dollars for greater opportunities for African Americans that live in those communities? I mean, to me, it would go hand in hand. Where our government puts their priorities, so goes the actions. And so, you know, let's have a conversation around what the expectation is from our local municipalities. Kansas City has, right now they have an interim African American city manager, but all of their department heads are white males. How important do you feel that diversity in leadership matters?
Is that to me?
Diane?
It matters a great deal. Thank you, Bridgette. It really, really matters. I can think of one African-American female that I believe is the department head for the Housing and Neighborhood Development. She's there. But even with that, as KC Tenants tries to hire a couple of people to work for the city as a tenant advocate, the job description came out a couple of days ago. You look at it and you say, wow, what a word salad. I mean, the things that you have to do and have to know and have just to be a tenant advocate. I mean, all we're doing is out there telling people about the Tenant Bill of Rights and what their rights are. That's what those two individuals would do. But by the time you get through, and again, that's used, even the description is used to keep you out, to discourage you from even applying. And that's that frustration. And they say, well, the attorneys came up with it or HR came up with it. I don't care. It still does not make a bit of sense. It still does not. And that's what they do with all the job descriptions for the city. I got some real issues with that. But not only that, who are we listening to? Who are we talking to? That's what I want to know. And it sure isn't somebody that looks like me, or some kid, my grandson that's 23 years old, or it's not my son that's 43 years old. It's none of them. They're listening to each other and coming up with some word salads.
Yes. Simone, how important do you think it is?
Representation brings about a greater understanding of the differences and the disparities between Black and white and the businesses. I think it is imperative that we do have the representation and decisions are made at the table. What the community gets is after the decision's been made. So we need people to be at the table, to be able to talk, to share, and to demand that things to take place. I know that sometimes people don't know what they don't know. And so if you have diversity at the table, then everybody can bring their perspective to be able to say, this is why this works here, this is why this does not work here. And so what is a unified plan for the betterment of the whole moving forward? We must be at the table.
That is so true. So we're going to wrap it up. This is our last question. So this is the lightning round. What do you feel would make life better for you as an African American in Kansas City in terms of race relations? Chris.
Make me first.
You didn't want to start, did you?
No, you go somebody else. I'll come back.
Okay, Diane.
Okay, what I heard you ask is what can be done to make life better
For you, for African Americans in Kansas City.
In Kansas City. That
Greater Kansas City, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. The leveling of the playing field. But you know, in capitalism, there's not going to be a whole lot of leveling. Power is not given away. Power is taken. And like Simone said, to get to that table, of course, they have their meetings and then they come to the table and act all like this and that. But if we get to that initial table, that very first table, or if we set the table and have people talk to us about stuff and come up with some action plans, what Harold said about having a plan, a strategic plan. But can we get along long enough to make a plan that we ain't fighting with each other about how the plan is going to go or who's going to initiate the plan?
Who's going to run the plan? Yes.
Who's going to run the plan?
Yes.
You know? So,
yes.
So that's what we've got to let go of our egos. We've got to let go of what is hurting us as a general, you know, as a community, as African Americans, and say, look, you made me mad maybe yesterday, but doggone it, we got something, a priority here. We've got to get together. And I think that would really improve the situation of all Black people.
I agree. Harold?
Stop killing our innocent Black men. Stop it. I mean, stop killing us. It's more than just a physical thing. Every time I was watching the news yesterday and I just got so mad. I had to keep reminding myself that I am a minister. But there's a weight, there's a heaviness that comes every time I see a Black man being shot and murdered and kicked, because those persons, George Floyd looked like people in my family. This is crazy. Rayshard Brooks, he looks like somebody that could have been in my family. So stop killing my family. I'm tired of, it's just beyond tired. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. George said, I can't breathe. Eric Garner said, I can't breathe. And every time I see this, it's a weightiness, and it goes beyond the physical into the emotional, into the spiritual realm of heaviness. As Chris has already said, we walk around with weights on us just being Black men. From the time that we come out of our mother's womb. What's good for my community to make my community better? I think that's the question. What's better for me right now? What's better for me is what's better for my community. I hope you can hear everything I'm saying. What's better for me is what's better for my community. So it's not good enough just to make sure that my life is better. I got a responsibility to make sure that I'm doing all that I can for the people that I represent, to make sure that they all come along. All votes. And so not to some of our everybody else. I'm done. I know I don't even have a good way to close this. I'm really emotional about this because I'm tired of seeing people getting killed. I'm tired of it. I'm beyond tired. I'm beyond mad. And so I have to think with a clear conscience when I come to the table, and you're right, Diane, sometimes we come to the table, this conversation are had before we get to the table. And so we always have to keep in mind who we represent at all times, and be vocal, and making sure that our points are being made that represent all of our people. So right now is a relative term, because right now is not measured in terms of today and tomorrow. I look at right now over the next 5, 10 years, 25 years, to make sure that in that period of time, life is better for my community that I've grown up in all my life. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you for that. Simone?
I think for me, I'm gonna say no more excuses. We can't keep having excuses and starting over. We as Black people, we get so far. We're all knowing that tomorrow, the 19th, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street was burned down. It's not the only one. It's, at least 5 more massacres. Black people, we have done this over and over, and we keep starting over. You can't build wealth as you continue to start over from scratch each time. We can't keep continuing to say, I didn't know, I didn't understand. Oh, really? That's news to me. It's no more excuses. It is the responsibility of each one of us to take personal responsibility to educate our families, our children. If we are CEOs, presidents of companies, what are you doing? And I don't mean just calling in your executives and having another round table to say how much we love our peers that are of color. What are the actual action steps? What are we doing? What are we actually doing? So again, it's no more excuses. I think earlier in the intro, Diane Cleaver talking about we didn't really pivot last time. Well, okay, so we're here again. Let's make sure we make the complete pivot. If you don't know Google works, please Google, please, go into the internet, research, ask, and let's get moving. Some action, 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 action. No more excuses.
Thank you, Simone. Chris?
I'm still not ready, but I'm gonna do my best. Man, you know what? What I've seen over the last few weeks, I've seen cold-blooded murder become trendy, become something that is reduced to looking cool on Instagram, or being a part of the movement. And so I don't know what could actually happen to make the experience better, but I know that the most important thing to me is authenticity. You can't turn on TV, Netflix, look anywhere and not see, oh, representation matters, Black Lives Matter, we are with you, and that's great. That's great. But at the end of the day, if it's not authentic, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. For me, my passion is impacting children. And so we as a city have to look at our babies. One of the things that commonly gets overlooked in terms of oppression is the food supply. What are our babies eating? What are our kids eating? And my passion, I will fight for it till the day I die. We got to make sure our kids are eating better, having a better outlook, and having a better opportunity from being able to just be healthier people, from the very baseline concept of what that looks like. So for me, I'd say if you are interested in understanding the Black experience, try as best you can to look at it through an authentic lens. Try and close your eyes and imagine walking outside and just being feared. Try and imagine just hopping in your car and trying to have your seat back to a certain point when you're near police just so they don't see you're Black. Try and walk in these steps for just a few moments. You can never understand it if you don't understand it, but try authentically. If you own a company, look at your company, look at the values, look at who you hire. Be intentional about what you're doing. Don't just have a session just to say, look what we did. Look how we were a part of the movement. It's phony. It's phony. And if you're dealing with an authentic person, it's going to be seen. So it's vague, but just keep it real.
So I think, as we close, at the end of the day, all that police officer had to do was take his knee off of George Floyd's neck. And so when we're having this conversation and talking about real action items, it has to start with some form of police reform. It has to be about accountability and deploying cameras, because at the end of the day, people, had this not been on video, this would not be an issue. And so the community needs to be more involved in, and the police board needs to be overhauled, and there needs to be some mental check-ins for police officers, and we need more police officers that look like us. But I think even more importantly is the public policy and the access to capital and the ability to buy a home if that's your choice. The final piece is access to jobs at all levels. It shouldn't just be entry-level manufacturing positions. If that's what you want to do, that's why we call this country America the home of the free, because you should be free to do that. But we also need people of color, both men and women, at the decision-making table. And so I think what you hear from this panel is the passion from the panel of the belief and from their experiences about what we need to do to make life better for our children, our community, and our children's children. And so with that, I want to turn it over to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Joe Reardon, to close us out. But I do want to thank each and every one of you, from Harold Johnson to Diane Charity, Simone Curls, and Chris Goode, and Justice, who had to leave early, for just being real and being transparent. Because I believe that today was the beginning of some new days in Kansas City. So with that, Joe.
Thank you very much, Bridgette. And let me echo your thanks to each member of the panel today. I want to thank you for your stories, your honesty, your courage and willingness to relive the pain that comes with being a Black man or woman in our community. Your testimony today has been moving, challenging, and at times disturbing. And I want to say personally, it's been particularly powerful because you are our coworkers, our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors. You are Kansas Cityans. And what we heard today will help inform us at the Chamber as we determine the concrete steps that we as a business organization will have to take to help dismantle the racist system you struggle against every day. There's no doubt in my mind this is a pivotal moment for all of us, and we can no longer sit on the sidelines. It is time for action. Today's listening session represents the first of several we have planned over the next month. So for those of you on the call, we'd love to have you join for another listening session next week on Friday, June 26th at 9 a.m. And after the 4th of July, we plan to hold an online session to look at the history of structural racism in Kansas City. And then finally, on July 29th, you're all invited to be a part of our annual Power of Diversity Breakfast, where we'll host a panel discussion on the steps that we need to take to move forward. I want to also thank again Diane Cleaver and the Urban Neighborhood Initiative for partnering with us today in such a valuable conversation. Thanks to Bridgette. It's not easy to handle this when you're online and be the moderator. And to all of our panelists who also have done such a great job dealing with the technology. And thanks to the literally hundreds of you that have joined us today. And I think on all of our minds as we leave today is what we each individually can do to make things better. And I hope that's something that we continue to come back to and challenge ourselves with. So thank you all very much. On behalf of the Chamber, we want to wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.